Thank you, thank you. Now, wouldn't it be amazing if that was how you always emerged from virtual reality? It isn't, believe me. I've probably got complete VR here, having sat in there for 20 minutes. Now, I'm here to tell you about foolishly spending 48 hours in virtual reality. Now, one of the first things I'm going to do here is switch off my coat. It's not a normal thing to say when you get on stage, is it? Hang on, bear with me. I have so many buttons to press here. There we go. That will stop distracting you, as if I haven't distracted you enough already. Now, yes, I spent 48 hours in virtual reality, foolishly, having not learnt my lesson from spending 24 hours last year. Now I will show you the results of that. I think that's by far the safest way to show you what happened first and explain you how we got there.
I wish you have another tattoo. No.
Very disorientating, I guess.
I'm never doing this again. I'm never doing this again. Yeah, I said that last time. The longer we spend in something like that, the more normal it gets. It may not seem normal to you, but I guess it does seem more normal to me. Anyway, how did I get there? So I get asked to talk about virtual reality a lot, simply because everyone wants to hear about it. It's been the next big thing for the last 3, maybe 4 years. I keep adding a year on because it's still the next big thing because we haven't quite got there yet. But I talk about VR, obviously. I talk about artificial intelligence, but using drones to try and illustrate that point. Artificial and augmented reality and using gestural control to take us to the next step so we start to remove all of those physical barriers. And then I get to play with cars quite a lot. I do love cars, which is a bonus, but actually the main thing is that they are now more connected and parts of our end-to-end life than they ever have been. It's not just the thing in the middle that gets us from A to B, it's how we get to the car and our information and our lives to it. And then once we're in that environment, the next steps are obviously fully autonomous and how do we entertain ourselves in that environment. VR will probably be one of those things, but I'll get onto that later as to say why that's definitely not there yet. And then how does that happen, beyond that as well? How do we then take that back out of a vehicle and carry on our journey as people rather than just passengers? So Brandwidth, now I'm head of innovation at Brandwidth, and we create all sorts of amazing things for amazing platforms. And part of what we do is we have, by default, been there first with lots of things. So gestural control back in 2008, people waving their arms around to communicate and interact with interesting platforms. And then we moved on in 2009 to guessing the iPad. Now, guessing is a word that we would associate with it, but actually it's very intelligent research and a lot of luck, to be honest. But we created a concept that was a piece of foam board, and we green screened and motion tracked some content onto that, dropped it out via various YouTube channels, and it exploded overnight, and everyone said, this is the new Apple thing. And it was. And that was the start of our beautiful relationship with Apple, which led on to things like the Apple Watch. So a couple of years before that appeared, we were out taking concepts to consumers and clients and various test groups to say, if something should appear, what would it be and what would it do and how would it work? And that's always interesting feedback, so it keeps us well ahead of the curve. And then in the corner, demonstrating VR, where I'm actually having a virtual reality lightsaber battle with myself, and Paul will testify to the fact that I then came off worse and died on stage as a result of that. Hopefully I'm not going to do the same thing today. Now, Brandwidth itself works right across the board with so many different clients. So for VR to fit into that, you know, lots of clients are coming to us now and saying, we need some VR. Why do you need some VR? Well, we just want some because everyone else is having some. That should not be the reason. And that was one of the reasons we were investigating spending and doing as much, you know, as much content, as much time as possible in virtual reality to say, you know, what's the future of your audience? What are they potentially going to do? Now, a taster of how that then gets applied should be on the walls around you. Now, I will talk over some of this because, again, this is realizing some of that concept. So thinking to the future, not just about what will people do, but what shape will it take and how will that affect their lives? So pieces of VR that involve sport, for instance, it's not about sitting on the sidelines, it's about getting in the thick of the action. You know, not all of that is, we're able to realize that right now, but it's the way that it should be done. Communicating with various devices, the Internet of Things is fabulous, and it's a huge, vast mess of a subject, but it's something that touches all our lives. Now, also thinking about all the basics, of course, how does that connect with the marketing message that sits underneath all of that lot? So everything that we do has a relevance in the real world. So again, I'll keep coming back to that with our 2 days. But VR in particular is a great way to demonstrate what works and what doesn't, more than almost anything else at the moment, simply because so many people are trying it. Moving on. Now, 18 years ago, we used our first piece of virtual reality experience. Now, that sounds as if we've been continually doing virtual reality for 18 years. We have not. What we have been doing, and then there was a big gap in the middle, which was obviously very unproductive, where there was no audience or subject matter at all. But what we were doing, we were very much the first to hit the ground when the next wave, the next generation of virtual reality appeared. So kind of 4.5 years ago, with Oculus appearing on the scene, this was the case. We were able to bring content immediately to bear and know how it worked, know how an audience should respond to it. But the big difference was there was now an audience. So whereas before it was fabulous stuff and incredible pieces of technology, but no way for an audience to actually get their eyeballs on that content. Now, the device in your pocket, in its lowest common denominator, can do that, and it can deliver a virtual reality experience. So I come back to foolishly attempting 2 days in virtual reality, having already spent a whole day in VR last year for T3 magazine, where one of the main things I wanted to do last year was to experience falling asleep and waking up in VR. Now that might sound quite simple and quite odd, but actually what I wanted to do there was shatter the illusions. And the illusion that you have when you place a VR headset on is you know you are going into virtual reality. Now, no matter how amazing that experience is, you know that you have taken an artificial step to do that. Now, if you fall asleep with a VR headset on, you know, that's just falling asleep. But when you wake up in VR, you believe everything you see. There is no theatre of going into VR. You just, as I did a year ago, I saw spaceships and dinosaurs, and I didn't question the fact that there were spaceships and dinosaurs in front of me. There were spaceships and dinosaurs. So there was no, this is amazing VR, this was just believable. So it's like being in a hotel room, you know, travel a lot, it may be unfamiliar, you may not know where you are, when you are, but you believe you are in a hotel room. Exactly the same, but with spaceships and dinosaurs. Now, roll that on another year, and this time we kind of took things steadily. So it was about using meditative software, taking ourselves slowly into a VR sleep, and then slowly waking up again. And it was a very different experience because it wasn't the sudden shock of that kind of content. You just were slowly brought up into it. And you know, luckily I did the dinosaurs and spaceships because this time my reaction was, oh, I'm still in here, which was a slightly different, probably not the reaction we were hoping for. So why did we do it? Well, we're all about pushing boundaries. So I've kind of demonstrated lots of firsts and constantly looking forward to what's the next thing and why is it relevant. But it's about it's conferences like this and more so purposely focused on VR. Do not talk about the downsides of VR. Now I make a point of keeping everyone in check and saying what we shouldn't be doing. You know, I can easily talk for hours and hours and hours about what's amazing and what's the potential. Now, what shouldn't people be doing? So what should you say no to which types of content? But also, no one talks about the health implications. The manufacturers will give you just a standard, oh, don't put the headset on for more than an hour. But they then don't say when you can come back and put the headset back on again. So none of them would support us for our 48 hours. Not a single manufacturer wanted to support us. They all thought we were going to go raving mad or just die. That was kind of their view on the whole thing. Hope that the dying bit didn't happen. Now I'm hoping the raving mad bit isn't going to kick in at some point. But the point was that we spent an hour, and every hour we had 5 minutes break with headsets off, and that was kind of the medical recommendation. But looking at all those other guidelines, we did our hour, but we went back in again. We weren't actually contravening any of their ideals. So no one is questioning any of this. So we thought we would be the ones to do that, and what were the results? So I think one of the other things we question here is VR's image problem. So probably, I can't see myself, which is probably a good thing, sticking headsets on for any amount of time and you end up looking something like this. Now that's all partly down to form factor. So that's not a VR headset, but trying to make the point is that they will get smaller, they will get more compact and user-friendly. Now they are a big lump of plastic on your face. But the biggest image issues we face are for technology in itself. So we've tackled glass holes. Good old Robert, he's always easy to use for these things. And VR Wellians. So again, this is a horrible view of the future where the thought is Zuckerberg will always, no matter which room you're in with a headset on, Zuckerberg will always be there walking through ready to sell you stuff on Facebook. Now then, AR souls. Again, I have an issue. The technology's great, and I have an issue when these are the poster boys of potentially the future. No offense, guys, but we kind of need Harrison Ford up there or someone. And then Robert's back again. So, we have issues with technology, and VR is one of those that really faces that. And never more so than when the week before we had our 48-hour attempt, there was a 25-hour attempt, which broke my previous 24 hours, and there was a 50-hour attempt. Now, these were both official Guinness World Records, and originally we said, let's try and make that attempt ourselves, but they said, no, you have to stay awake for the entire time, which was ludicrous, because we wanted to live in VR, and in doing so, we wanted to sleep and do things that normal, or semi-normal humans do. And the guys that were doing those attempts looked like this. Now, that's not helping to change any of the ideas about what VR is about. There's no diversity there for sure, but it's these two guys in the corner were sat on a sofa watching TV for 50 hours in VR headsets. This guy here got so motion sick he threw up in a bucket. Now, we got relatively motion sick with some things, but that was not the image that we wanted to take to the outside world, because most people, when you say, what's VR then? They go, oh, it's stuff that makes you sick, isn't it? It's a bit like, what's augmented reality? I don't know. Is it Pokemon? Yeah, that's fine. Anyway, the examples of this is, look, 90% of the Chinese startup producing VR headsets have gone bankrupt. Now, let's apply that to hoverboards and smartwatches. If you don't do it right, of course they're going to go bankrupt. If you're not selling it well, if you're not making it well, if you're not creating great content to go on that, then of course these things will happen. And these are all part of the image problem that we were desperate to counter. So what do we do? So it was myself and Sarah Jones of Coventry University. So great diversity, look, straight away there. But the reason with Sarah's involvement was through Coventry University, there was genuine research here. It wasn't just people messing about playing games. There was something actually useful came out of this. So what do we do? So, almost the mundane stuff here featured is things that were testing the brain for various kind of puzzles and all sorts of things. Again, relatively simple, but doing that at various times throughout the 48 hours to see if we were getting any worse at doing what we would normally do. And Facebook Spaces was out in beta the week before, so again, seeing how we could push that for social application outside of VR with people bringing them in. And then the guided meditation in the corner was how we kind of took ourselves into the sleep mode. And in the corner is boxing, which was kind of the surprise of all of our experiences, that we were so exhausted after just one round because it was so real. It wasn't I mean, the great thing about potential for exercise in VR is not just that you are exercising, but training. So, you know, a punch bag does not punch you back. In VR, it does. And that's, you know, that's more than just exercise. And then moving on from that, how do we live and breathe when we're in VR? So this, again, was a key point about living in it. So walking around was interesting. It was like drunk people. Eating was interesting. It was like drunk people. Lots of that. Yeah, you think it would be the simple things in life, but yeah, no, you can't do it. Sitting in the back of a car, again, I said, you know, various points we faced motion sickness, where the worst thing was sitting in the back of a car, and as the car turns, if you're viewing 360 content, the car turns, and suddenly your content moves. So you're not moving it, you're not in control anymore. So that is very disorientating. And then pushing the limit. So the physical applications that we tried to, again, take it away from the couch. So we were actually go-karting. We had the headsets on. We were going around a go-kart track, using the through camera here because what we wanted to do was to test the potential for VR and AR application and, you know, what would work best. And, you know, through very limited vision and actually pixelated content, it was quite quickly we picked up, you know, the course, the route, and what we were doing, and it felt unreal. But it was like a virtual environment. And then my tattoo. So again, this makes it just seem ridiculous, and that's pretty much the words my wife used when she discovered that I'd had a tattoo via Facebook. But the point here was to see if we could mitigate pain through virtual distraction. So I started out, this was my first tattoo, I had no idea, I knew it would be painful, that was the point, and it needed to be sustained pain. So without the headset on, I started the tattoo. So that was my benchmark. So if my benchmark was 10, with the headset then on and using fairly intense kind of arcade gaming, I probably reduced the pain threshold to about a 7 or a 6. So genuinely, you know, useful, that's anecdotal, useful research. But we had Apple Watches on throughout, so we were measuring heart rate, and heart rate dropped again as well. Not fully, because I was still quite intensely playing games, but you know, there was something useful there that we got out of it. And I got a tattoo. And then the final extreme push was to, why not? Why wouldn't you strap yourself to the wing of a biplane and see what ridiculous pressures you could put yourself under when you're using a VR headset? Now, I say using a VR headset. I had a Gear VR, Samsung Gear VR on my head, climbed to the top wing of the plane moved itself down to the other end of the airfield, and then my phone decided it wanted to do a software update. So it's great when it just says you will do a software update rather than so I love Apple products. The fact that I've got an Apple icon on my arm probably testifies to that. But at least Apple says, now, when would you like me to remind you about possibly updating your software, rather than this is it, take it or leave it. So I was stuck on the wing with a useless phone. So I had to take the phone out and do the entire thing through massive blurred lenses on a piece of plastic. Now, if I was going to be really negative about that, which I have been about Samsung, and there you go, fair enough. The takeaway from this to try and spin it positively was I experienced the whole thing as someone very nearly blind. Now, all joking aside, there's an empathy factor there that VR delivers more so than anything else. So there is something to genuinely take away from that. The most confusing thing, to be honest, was that at one point I thought we'd already taken off and we were still on the ground, just to show how little I was aware of what was actually going on around me. Now, to sum up what we did, this screen essentially gives you how much we achieved away from a sofa. So, 48 hours in VR, that's the obvious one. 30 experiences, so there's lots and lots of variety in there to, to keep the brain active as much as anything. 36 hours spent standing. Now, we were definitely not on a couch. 20 miles traveled, 39 flights climbed. All of these stats emphasize the fact and go against the grain of that bad image that VR has of someone slumped on a sofa. We're trying to avoid that. And, the future, if this is going to be a bright future for VR, it has to be positively physical as well as virtual. Thank you.